Hi, everybody. Bill Kenny here. Hope you're doing really well today. Welcome to our webinar, How to Start Conversations and Identify Opportunities at Events. It's actually Sue Powers, our guest, is aiming to join us here in just a few minutes. She's having a little bit of problem logging in, so we should see her in just a moment. I'm just going to, I have another screen going here, and I just want to stop the sound. Oh, there it is right there. So we'll get the sound on that all set. In any event, the real goal of this today, and hopefully Sue can join us. The content's great. Hopefully I can muddle through it if not. But these technology things are always a lot of fun. So what we want to do is get into the sort of the challenges and maybe some of the best practices for walking through and attending events. And so this could be, we could be exhibitors, we could be attendees, we could also be at some of the social events or the networking. But in any case, being able to start a conversation and effectively figure out who to meet with as you go through that process is really critical. So that's our goal today. And Sue Powers, I should tell you a little bit about her. And again, hopefully she joins us. But she's just a rock star. I've known her for probably more than 10 years. She's a trainer, or was a trainer for Sandler Sales training, and then joined our team somewhere maybe 6-10 months ago, something like that. And it's just fantastic, both at helping clients in terms of the consultative side of what we do in terms of building event strategy, but also she's wonderful at events and also prepping team members to go and execute events really, really well. So again, hopefully she joins us. We'll just keep this going. So just so you know a little bit about Meet, what we are is a company that helps growth companies exhibit at trade shows and leverage in-person events, really an in-person inbound marketing company. And so it's in that context that we want to get into this topic. So I'm just going to pull up the questions that I'd be asking to Sue, and we'll go through them. Many of you submitted questions as well, so we'll make sure to answer those. If you would like to add additional questions, please do so. Just put them in the comment area. I'm actually looking on my viewing screen. I don't see a comment area, so you could pop them to me on email. Oh, it says chat is disabled for this live stream for some reason. I know this YouTube tool is going away. They're going to a new product beginning August 1. So maybe some of the functions have been disabled. I don't know. But we'll know in August when we get onto the new platform. So so what we're going to do, I'm going to kind of go and address some of the questions that we had sort of pre-scripted ahead of time. And then we'll get into your questions. And then certainly if you have other questions that you'd like to share, let us know, and we'll address those as well. And again, if you email them, we may not get to them till later, but we're certainly happy to follow up and share additional info. So I shared a little bit with you about Sue's background. I told you a little bit about what she does for Meet. And so again, the types of events that we're talking about, you could be exhibiting and in the booth. You could be at some of the social events in the evening at various conferences and whatnot. You also could be at networking events or social events. And so we're going to use that context. And obviously those are different situations, and each of us will probably play a slightly different movie in our head about, when we're in these situations. But let's make sure that we kind of pop down through these, and we'll kind of try to address it from those various perspectives. So the first question is, are there differences between starting conversations and identifying opportunities at the trade show booth versus walking the floor or at an evening social event? So, I think maybe the thing to do is start off first with what's similar. So it's similar in that we need to have goals. In each of those scenarios, we need to have specific objectives that we're aiming at. How many contacts we want to make. And obviously, this isn't necessarily a volume game. We're aiming at quality. And our focus is all on business-to-business sales, typically aiming at meeting executives. And so the key really here is to make sure that first we meet high quality people. And so having goals around how many high quality contacts we make is really important to the process. So thinking about this in terms of what else do we need to do, we certainly need to have that goal. We need to be well scripted. In other words, what do we want to say? So one of the things to think about when we're communicating at these events, number one is, it's funny when people look at where do they get their referrals from. Almost 100% of the time, people will say it's from past customers or existing customers. But yet when they go to events, they expect to make relationships that will drive referrals. And really, when you go to events, who you want to meet are resources, people who will make you smarter, better, more reliable from the standpoint of people that are important to you. In other words, your customers. And so by having a good bullpen, when you go to events, if you build your bullpen, resources that you can bring to bear to help your clients, then your clients will become stronger advocates, and you'll get more referrals. So when you think about building your plan when you go to events, number one is you want to figure out who are good contacts for you from a standpoint of building that resource pool. And then two is having language and both questions, but also your own self-introduction that not only connects with those kinds of people, but also informs people you meet of who you want to meet. And those resources, are, as you talk to your existing customers, are there resources that they need right now that would be just in time right now? And as you understand and fill that demand, you build goodwill, you build credibility, and you also actually make connections that are much more valuable. And so think of this going to events a lot like the game memory. It's really about making those matches. And obviously it's going to be different in the booth. In the booth, we're much more about identifying prospects and separating the prospects from, that could be tens of thousands of attendees, finding, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, 10, 15 prospects that are among 10,000. And a prospect has to have a need, money, and now. And so we need to have language that separates and finds those people that are urgent and have a need and have the financial capability to solve that need or satisfy it. And so the language, again, a good self-introduction, the education of the audience as to who we want to meet. But first, it's really about learning who we're talking to. Who is this person? What did they do? What are their goals, and maybe what connections can we help them make? And it's going to be from that we begin the process of making good connections. So again, thinking about in the booth, it's going to be much more focused on prospect identification. Out in the general networking, in networking events or social events, it might be more focused on resource identification. And then as we are in the event, it's going to be much more focused on, just at the seminars and workshops, it might be anything from prospect to partner to resource identification. It really depends on what our goals are. But again, the booth is much more about let's find prospects. The social events and networking events probably much more resource oriented, and then walking the floor could be any of the three, from prospect to resource to partner identification. So let's now talk about let's see, what are the differences between starting conversations and identifying opportunities? I'm sorry, I talked about that. What kinds of mistakes do people make when looking to start conversations and identify opportunities at events? So, I think the challenge for a lot of people is they talk too much, right? So they come in, they throw up on people, and then they leave. Again, it's not what you say at events as much as what you learn that allows you to connect and build relationships and ultimately build customer relationships with people. And so being able to ask good, thoughtful questions about what somebody does, what are the big challenges they're facing, what are they hoping to accomplish while they're at this event, those types of things will help you make matches and ultimately find key prospects and or resources for your business. And so, yeah, talking too long is a real key. I think not going with a goal is a huge mistake, or a set of goals. And you think about the idea of your business. You start the year, you have a budget. The budget tells you when you are successful. It tells you how to manage your effort. It tells you what resources you need to apply. It's exactly the same thing when you go to events. Is the goals you set help you manage your effort. It helps you know when you're done, helps you know when you're successful. The funniest thing is always going to events and seeing people who are there an hour or 2 hours after the event's over, and they're still chatting away. And that may be very productive, but it in some cases tells me that they just don't know when they're done, and so they have a hard time leaving. And that's again why we accomplish a budget, because it allows us to be successful, to be focused, and so on. I'd say the other mistake that people make is that they actually never get into the conversation. So, I think sort of, I would say even whether people are introverts or they're just more reserved, the idea that they never get into the scrum, into to the main part of conversations where they're actually talking to and meeting with enough people who would be active and possibly good contacts for them. You might think of this a little bit like a high school dance. The situation where the uncomfortable kids are against the wall, or maybe even outside the room. And then the cool kids are in the middle, and the cool kids are in the fun conversations. They're the ones that are dancing. They're the ones that are meeting new people and enjoying good company. And so you may need to warm up along the edges. You may need 1 or 2 or 3 conversations with the less comfortable folks. But the real money is made, and the real connections and quality of participation is made when we get into the middle, when we get into the scrum, and actually start communicating with people and learning from them and making those good connections. So you want to hop in as quickly as possible. So are there some preparatory steps you take before entering the event? And again, I hope Sue joins us, but I'm gonna keep diving in. This is certainly something that as a company we've spent a lot of time on, and I know Sue would add more flavor to this, and maybe we can get her to join us at a future time when technology is more her friend. But so the preparatory steps, I think, again, we've already talked about the goals and that stuff, but I think other things you might do is, actually before you walk into the event, because we've all come from, possibly a busy morning, tough traffic getting into the event first thing in the morning, or maybe it's an evening event and it's been a full day of activities. And so we need to somehow refocus, maybe re-energize a little bit. And we'll all have different rituals here, but one that I've seen work really well is to just take a minute in your car or before you walk in, sit on a bench somewhere, and just remind yourself of why you're going, of what's important. Maybe put away the other activities that you've done that day. Put away whatever your normal role is. If you're in sales, put away your 6-shooters. Because you might be going into an event that it's more appropriate to find resources as opposed to find prospects. And so you want to refocus that effort, because you'll scare away resources very quickly if they perceive, and in fact, you'll scare away prospects quite often if they perceive that you are trying to sell something to them. And you may, again, it's a lot like fishing, right? We have to be really careful when to pull the hook, and if we pull that hook either on the wrong kind of fish or too early, we probably won't catch what we intend, and quite often we'll scare them away, and very hard to get them back when we scare them away. So yeah, taking a quiet minute, doing a little bit of breathing, doing a little bit of focusing, always helps in these kinds of things. I think the other thing to do is think about when you go into these situations. We all have friends that are really good at networking, and people that we admire, or they're really good at being in the booth and interacting with people, and we can somehow put them in our mind and think about them and really kind of focus on that person. And the idea here is to model their behavior so that when we walk in the event, we're thinking about how, instead of, sort of going to our normal behavior, which might be, talking to folks on the side of the room, or maybe not engaging people as well as we might when we're at the booth, is actually for that event, for that day, for that, series of days, whatever the event is actually model them, be them in those moments. So instead of going to our normal behaviors, think about the behavior they would have when they're in the booth and interacting with people, whether it's grabbing, I say grabbing, but encouraging people out of the aisle to have a conversation, or, making sure that they're not on their electronics, making sure that they're not sitting down, making sure that they're, standing up and engaging people as they're coming by, and taking care of those sort of opportunities to identify prospects. Or if you're at the networking events, what is that model person doing? Are they, in the middle with the cool kids? Are they identifying new people to have good conversations with? Are they asking questions that are meaningful and help them make their next better connection? Those types of things. So modeling can be really good, and it can be a really good pre-event ritual to do. So let's go to our next question. See, I have my sheet of questions here, so I'm just going to flip pages. So the next question is, do you need to adapt your messaging to each audience? And if so, how do you do that? So yeah, I mean, actually, many of our attendees today are from outside of the United States and thinking about coming to events in the United States. So certainly we need a localized communication in that regard. In other words, use languaging that is more US centric, so that, not even just languaging, but mannerisms, style, all those kinds of things that will allow US people to feel comfortable in terms of interacting. I think the other type of adaptation that we want to do is to the industry or to the type of group that we're going to spend time with. For example, if you're at an event that is for the legal profession, you're going to use terms like, instead of customer, you're going to say client. If you are talking about various parts of their business, you're going to adapt to their languaging. They operate on billable hours, and that's really important to that business model, is maximizing the billable hours that they do during the course of a day and a week and so on. And so again, just sort of thinking about the audience that you're with, and some audiences are very diverse and mixed, and so we're going to have to be prepared to read the person that we're talking to adapt our language and our communication to them. And again, we'll get some of that nonverbal feedback when we begin talking. And if we talk too long, obviously their nonverbals should begin to give us guidance to stop talking and ask a question and interact and help them get into the conversation. And again, usually in events, it's not what you say, it's what you learn that creates value. And again, whether we're aiming at identifying prospects or partners or any other kind of resource, then that's all good. So yeah, continue to adapt your language, both based on localizing for the geography we're in, but also to the audience that we're talking to. So think about the audience. Right? All communication is about the audience. Okay, so next question. What's the process when you arrive at the event, and what do you prioritize? Yeah, ultimately you want to arrive at the event fully hydrated, fully nourished, and so that you can participate. The funny thing to me is, and obviously you go to a full day event, there's going to be different sort of, sort of situations here. You probably need, if it's full day, you'll probably need at least lunch somewhere through the day. But for the moment, let's talk about like the, 2-hour networking event. That you shouldn't need food or drink when you go to that. Maybe some water or something like that partway through. That's great. That's fine. But I mean, any event that is formed, the audience is perishable. In other words, the audience is temporary. It will go away at the end of the event. If they do another event next week or next month or next year, there may be some of the same people there, but there won't be all of the same people there. In other words, we'll never have the chance to connect with some of the people in the room ever again. So we want to use this opportunity to make connections with people that would be most meaningful to us and take advantage of that sort of perishable opportunity, which is this particular event. So eat before you go, even if you have to grab a sandwich or something to eat on the road, or maybe you pack a protein bar so that, before the event you can have something to eat. Your stomach shouldn't be growling. You should be fully focused. Walk in the room with, ready to go with both a focus, your agenda, and be able to sort of power through it. Again, if it's like that, 2 to 3 hour type event, you should be able to go through and maybe have your, a more substantive dinner afterwards. I think other preparation we've talked about in terms of getting your script right, getting your focus and targets right, those are really key. So let's take a look. Yeah, when it comes to actually starting a conversation, what do you do that you find works best? So starting a conversation, again, we might be modeling and thinking about that person who we really want to emulate and sort of act as they would. Some things that I would consider is, when we're going in to talk to people, a couple of thoughts. Number one is, if we're focused, if we know who we want to meet, and when I say who do we want to meet, you want to know who you want to meet by either name or discipline. So you may have specific targets in mind, either companies or people, and in which case you should focus on them. Or you may know of industries or types of professionals or people who would be good for you to meet at these events. And so therefore, they're really kind of a couple opportunities. One is to directly focus on them. And so when you come into the event, some events you can see the name tags, or maybe you even have exposure to who's going to be at the event ahead of time. The more you can understand that and even preset meetups at this event with those people, the better off you are. You also have the opportunity, and actually probably one of the least used resources at events are the hosts themselves. And whether you contact them ahead of the event or you sort of see them as soon as you get there, asking them, letting them know, hey, I'm looking to meet either these people or people from these companies, or I'm looking to meet these types of people in by industry or geography or whatever other criteria, and ask for their help. Who else will be in the room that I should meet? And is it possible to get introduced? So you can self-identify these individuals and go around and meet them, or you can get someone that they trust or that they know, such as either a host or a senior member, or sort of a longtime community member to uh, to make introductions for you. So I think those are really easy. And so you think of that. I think those are make it really helpful. And obviously, if you're at the booth at an event, you may take breaks from the booth to walk around and go to places, either to other booths where those people will be, or workshops where those people will be, or sub events within that those people will be, and actually make those connections, or get a host or a facilitator to make those connections. But use the resources that you have with you and that are within your easy grasp to make those connections. That's really, really important. So let's see. So time is a precious commodity at events. How do you discover meaningful information efficiently? So yeah, this is always interesting. So there are a few different scenarios here. One scenario is where we're at the booth and people are coming to us, and obviously if we have the right messaging, the right people are coming to us. But so there we're asking questions about what they do, what are some of the key goals that they have, why are they at this event, what are they hoping to accomplish, at the and really trying to understand that. And so we're kind of identifying what are sort of key opportunities for them, and whether we can solve it or not. Making those connections is really key. And then as we get out into the other types of the other areas of the event, being able to make those connections and ask good questions to glean information. So if we're doing more competitive intelligence, which is a really different skill, we're going to ask probably a lot more questions around what we're trying to discover, rather than being direct. And maybe we'll ask more open-ended questions because we want people to sort of to talk openly and more openly about us, or with us, I'm sorry. And so that we sort of get them to share information. I think most of our conversations, though, are around prospect identification or partner identification. And so it's really about sort of what do they do, what are they sort of looking to accomplish, who do they serve, are there gaps that they're trying to solve that will help them have a better year, those types of things. What we tend to find is if what we're doing isn't in somebody's top 3 list, they're probably not going to be very urgent as a prospect. In other words, they're probably not a good prospect right now. They may be in the future, when what we work on is in their top 3 list. And so discovering that really helps us very quickly understand if they are truly a prospect or maybe a future prospect. Okay, so this will be the last question that is sort of directed by me, and the rest will be audience questions, which I'm really looking forward to. So are there KPIs or indicators that you use to measure success? Actually, there are. And this is actually, I think, something that's really important. And we see a lot of people having challenges in terms of measuring their success from event participation. And so the real, where we want to get to and what we hope to be able to understand is a relationship between our event participation and revenue generated. I mean, that's the kind of the normal place we want to go. Now, because most of us on this webinar focus on B2B, we know that there's a long sales cycle, generally 6 to even 24 months of sales cycle before we actually see a prospect generated at an event become a sale. So, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. It's a rainy day here, and it's heavy air. Sorry, I'm powering through. But so in any event, sorry about that. So what we want to do is, idea of measuring revenue generated, we don't have 6 months or even 24 months to understand the production of our events. Now, the good news is that there are several indicators of sales or several contributors, right? And so in order to get a sale, typically there are probably 4 basic steps. You have the close, and then backing up from that, we have a proposal, right? So we have a sale or an agreement. We have a proposal that happens. In order to get to a proposal, we have to have had a first meeting with a decision maker or an economic buyer. There are different terms for this, but ultimately somebody that signs the check. So we go from the sale, we have to have had a proposal. In order to get to the proposal stage, we had to have had a first appointment with somebody who can make a decision. And preceding that, we need to have met them and had that initial interaction. And so we actually, as we look at marketing, we see sort of 3 levels. We need to have first, created some awareness. We need to become aware of each other, or they need to become aware of us as a minimum. And then 2, we get down to some level of intimacy where there's some knowledge exchange. And then we go down to a level of trust. And that trust is usually when we can get agreement for that first appointment. And so what we find is that there are a variety of marketing strategies that move a prospect from that initial awareness through intimacy and to trust and to that initial appointment. And so what we usually do and what we find works best is that if we measure the number of appointments created from any event at the 4-week post-event standpoint, so 28 days later, it's kind of easy because it's always on the same day of the week. So every Monday morning, we're measuring what production has happened, or on the appropriate Monday mornings, from the various events. And that way it's really easy to kind of be consistent. But ultimately, we want the same number of days to transpire. And we go from the, if it's a multi-day event, we go from the end of the event to that measurement. And so it's always the same number of days post the last day of the event that we're measuring the number of appointments set from people who we met at that event. And these have to be first appointments with prospects, essentially. And so then we can rationalize that against what the event cost to be able to understand the cost per first appointment. And we know it's just a ratio from there to the number of proposals, and finally to the number of sales made, and to the revenue made from those sales. And so it's actually easy enough, and we've actually built systems to do this, to be able to calculate those ratios. And it's often something we do early in a client relationship, is to establish those ratios, so that actually when we go to the events, we not only can look to meet new people who would be good to have meetings, those first meetings with, but we can actually set targets. So if we know that it takes 20 contacts, new contacts generated to create a sale, or maybe it takes 50 is probably a better ratio to create that sale. So 50 maybe creates 25 appointments, maybe creates 10 proposals or 5 proposals or whatever, that creates that one sale, let's say, for example. And so we know that if we want to create 5 sales at an event, and it's 50 contacts per sale, then we know we need 250 contacts. And if it's let's say it's a 2-day event, then we need 125 contacts per day, and there are 3 people in the booth, then we need somewhere around 40-ish contacts per person per day. So and then you go, okay, so before lunch, we each half of the day we need 20 contacts per person. Actually in an 8-hour day, that's 5 contacts per hour. That's not bad at all. Can you make 5 contacts per hour at an event? Heck yeah. And so when you bring it down to that level, it's really easy to manage the process. So you can kind of go both ways with these KPIs, but ultimately this can be really informative for how you measure your event success, but also how you set your goals, manage your team, all those kinds of things. So let's get to your questions, because that's really the fun part of all this. So, okay. So some of these are going to be not necessarily redundant, but sort of in a similar vein. So I'm going to try to address them together. So the first question: how do you bring up a conversation but not be salesy in your pitch? What's the right way to start a conversation? Well, I think ultimately it's being interested in the person, not being interested necessarily in your objectives. Essentially their goals are going to determine whether or not they're a prospect or not. So, and if we remember the very simple sort of adage that a prospect needs to have three qualities. They need to have a need, money, and they need to be urgent. So they need to have a need, they need to have enough money to satisfy that urgency or satisfy that problem. And then finally, they need to be urgent. So we say need money now. And so, yeah, probably the best way to not be salesy is to not be desperate. You want to be focused on them. What are their objectives? What are they trying to accomplish? And then, of course, if you are interested in them, normally what happens is they become interested in you. And so they'll ask about what you do. And so being able to bridge that, and if there are some areas that you can help them accomplish what they're looking to accomplish, then you're going to do really well. And usually, and hopefully some of you have seen some of our webinars where we're focused on what do you have in the booth, and what's the focus in the booth. There's a lot more to this in terms of the specifics on sort of how to address your booth. But right now we're talking about language, and language is about, and we're interacting with people. It's going to be more about them. And then if it makes sense to get together based on what you've learned about them, then simply telling them, hey, it really sounds like we should get together, whether we can do that in person or we do it virtually. Is there a time over the next couple of days that we could meet up or have a conversation on the phone? And, do that right there. Set that appointment while you're with them. We all have experienced what it's like to come back from an event, not only and have the time pressure to do follow-up, but also the fact that people quite often don't respond to emails or phone calls as timely as you would want. And why not take advantage of, while we're standing here, let's just set a time to talk next week. Boom. And then you both save the sort of headache of that follow-up process that we generally tend to prove over and over again is inefficient and flawed. So not being salesy is first and foremost being focused on the other person's success and making sure that you're attentive to what they're looking to accomplish while they're at this event, and what would be meaningful for them, to solve over the next couple of months. So how do we break the ice and approach and what's a good opening? So we talked a little bit about the idea of either getting a host or a trusted ally to introduce us. That's a great way to break the ice. There's also that situation, and this may be where the person is talking about, where we're standing outside of a group, and it may be anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 people talking together, and we're the odd person out, right? We're the 6th person. We're maybe a row back, just looking in, and we've kind of walked to an area of that circle where there's a slight opening, but it has not been open for us, and the people closest to us haven't turned towards us to sort of let us in. So there are a couple of different strategies here. One is, kind of getting closer to the group with your body. So bringing your body into the circle as much as possible and seeing if you can get it to open up a little bit. That's certainly one strategy. And you may do that, and you may try to do that for a minute or 2 minutes. I think once you get up to 2 minutes, you may want to move on, do something else. So what you might find works really well, because there may be one person, and normally there's sort of one person that you're sort of looking to say hi to, or at least have an initial conversation with, is hopefully you've walked over to their side of the circle, or their, sort of where they are, and you're next to them. Take a business card, your business card, out of your pocket, and when there's a moment, is hand it to them, and even interrupt to do this, is to say, I don't want to interrupt. I'm very sorry. And even look at the person that they're talking to, or that's talking to them. Just, I apologize. I don't want to interrupt. I just really want to pass you my card and ask you to either find me at this event or reach out to me, because I'd love to learn more about what you do and see if there are ways for us to work together, or whatever the value proposition is. It's important to have a succinct value proposition, but do that. Get your card in their hand and ask them for theirs. Get that, make notes, your follow-up notes right on their card. But make sure that you do that. It's a really polite way to do it, and then back away. It's 30 seconds, you're in, you're out, and they're continuing their conversation, and you haven't been sort of a jerk that stood there for 5 minutes staring at them, and you haven't wasted your time. And so you want to sort of be fair to that process. So hopefully that helps. That makes sense. But be polite, but sort of be firm, and then be polite again. So let's see. How to keep an easygoing conversation. Again, if you're interested in the other person, and you're focused, you have an agenda, you have certain people you've set out to meet. I think where networking, or where event participation becomes challenging, is when you haven't set a goal, when you're not sort of aimed at something. Then you sort of network or work the event very randomly. It's much easier to work an event, or to use events, if you're focused, because then you're gonna talk to certain people, you're gonna aim at certain parts of that event, and you're gonna go in with specific things you want to accomplish, which really changes your ability to start conversations and to sustain them in an effective way. And to be able to close on either a next step, like setting up a phone call or a time to meet in person, or to have some other interaction in the future. Let's see. How to convert an initial conversation into a follow-up meeting. Yeah, I just think, hey, what we've, I think number one is, I don't want to dominate your time here. We've been together a few minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. I'm sure you have other people that you want to meet. It seems like we have more to talk about, and probably some potential areas we could work together. Is there a time next week that we can set up to continue the conversation, either in person or via the phone? Or is there a time before this conference ends that we can grab coffee or do whatever? But I think, just getting, number one, observing the fact that you're conscious of not dominating their time. They probably have other people they want to see, or whatever, or other parts of the event that they want to participate in. And so relieving them of that, and then setting another time to talk in more detail, instead of that 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes we might get, to actually sit down for a half hour or an hour and really break bread. Let's see. So here's an interesting question. How do you get by the gatekeeper or booth concierge when attending trade shows? Key contacts and decision makers are deep in the booth. What is the key? I'm just going to have a quick sip of water so that I stay hydrated. Excuse me. So this is kind of an interesting feature, and many of you have probably been to events where they're larger booths, maybe they're 40 by 40 feet or larger, and they have sort of a front desk, and they may have an appointment room or a second floor with meeting rooms on it and all sorts of fancy stuff. And so quite often there's somebody or some people at a front desk, and they're managing appointments for either the decision makers that are in the booth, or for the salespeople or management that are in the booth. And so if there are certain people you want to get to, I think there are a variety of tactics that you might use. Number one is, if you can, anything you can preset is much, much better. So to the degree that you can preset those meetings, it's great. I think the other part of this is, think about what is meaningful to those people you want to meet with. So what's the value proposition for them to have a conversation with you? So it might be, there may be, walking into, some booths, you're going to have companies that are conglomerates. In other words, they have multiple divisions. And so there might be a variety of different divisions represented in the particular booth. And so maybe your business is only concerned about one of the divisions. Let's call it the intellectual property division, for lack of anything better. So maybe and there are a lot of different scripts. So I'm playing one in my mind, but one might be, I'd love to talk to somebody from the intellectual property division who's responsible for partnering. So we either represent partnering companies, or we may be a good partnering candidate. Is there somebody here from the intellectual property department that I can talk to? And so I think, again, just keeping your words really simple and direct, but who do you want to meet and why? What's in it for them? What's in it for them in this case is making a new partner relationship, where obviously they could either serve their existing clients better, or meet new potential clients. That's all really good. So again, very situational, but those people who are the sort of so-called gatekeepers are also people who can be exceptionally helpful and can really guide you. And whether the person you need to meet is at the event or not, quite often they can connect you to them. And so making sure, and they're there to make connections. They're there to facilitate. So they're your ally. They want to help you. Just give them the information that they need to be able to get you to the right person. Let's see. It's always hard to gauge the prospect's real interest. Any surefire questions to share up front? So yeah, so I'll share a metaphor with you, and that is, and some of you have heard this because we've shared this, and this is sort of the base of our marketing philosophy. And so if you think of what you're trying to do, just like somebody that fishes would think about how they would, what they would do when they go out fishing. So when somebody goes out fishing, they make three decisions. So the first one is what fish do I want to catch? That's the first decision they make. So obviously a metaphor here for marketing. What is it you are trying to catch? What does a prospect look like? And that should be narrowed down to a very tight persona by product or by service. And it may be there are a couple of different personas based on, for each specific product or service. That's okay, but it should be very narrow. The more narrow it is, the better. And when I say that a fisherman determines what fish they want to catch, let me give you some context to that. And this is exactly the same as what we need to do as marketers. And that is, there are 34,000 species of fish in the world, plus all sorts of subspecies. So being focused and determining what fish you want to catch means that you've eliminated 33,999 species of fish, plus all the subspecies. That's a really powerful thing to be able to do that. So when you're marketing, and when you talk about to gauge whether someone's a prospect, they need to have responded to something you've put out there that identifies them as a prospect. So the next two steps will help with that. So we know who we're aiming at. So right, what fish do we want to catch? The next two decisions are critical, right? So that once the person that's going fishing decides what they want to catch, then they decide where they're going to go fishing, because you only want to go fishing where those fish are present. And that might be the body of water. It also might be the area or cove of that body of water. It might be the depth of water, because there are fish at all different depths. Um, and then finally, once they know specifically where they're going to fish, they determine what bait will attract that fish. And so all three of these, when we start our hypotheses, we have to experiment. We have to, and it's going to be a little different as we go to different groups, different types of events, and so on. And we need to find all three of those answers, the right one. So the first one, once we have it, should be much more constant, but there may be some variation by audience in terms of how we articulate the buyer persona and so on. But ultimately, what we're going to tweak is the body of water we go to, and then the bait we put in the water. And so when you talk about how do we know if someone's a prospect, the best prospects opt in based on an offer we make. In other words, sort of imagine going out and dragging a net through the water. We could catch anything that's in the water in the area of the net that we're dragging through, right? So it could be all different types of fish, some that we want, some that we don't want, some that are too small, some that are too big, some that are not, that are poisonous. There are so many different things that we might catch. Besides, we'll catch a few tires, whatever else. But if a fish swims in to nibble on our bait, they have selected our bait. And so think of that in the booth. Imagine having a bait that only your prospects are interested in, because the thing that we don't see when we're fishing is all the fish that swim by our bait. So we're oblivious to this. But when we're at events, we don't have that benefit. Some people have scarcity mentality. It's hard for them to see people swim by their bait, but it's actually the best thing, because it's going to be a very small number of people at a let's say a trade show who are actually prospects. So if somebody doesn't opt into our bait, it simply means that they're not a prospect now. They may be in the future, and that's cool. We'll be around, but we want to find, our prospecting wants to find people who are desperate for the solution we offer, that have a problem that is so acute that they need to make a decision quickly. They need to make a decision soon, today, ideally, but soon. And we none of us can afford prospects that grow hair in our pipeline. We need stuff that has velocity, that's moving through, and people that are really dealing with the stuff that we are solving. So, okay. So, here's a huge one. And I saved this one till last because I want to make sure that we spend a little bit of time on it. So we lack a unified process and approach for this. In other words, going to events and communicating effectively and finding good prospects. So we lack a unified approach, process and approach for this. And our booth staff have varying levels of comfort and experience. From an event management standpoint, this makes it difficult to provide recommendations that everyone can get on board with. Organizing the team and getting the team on board. So I think, there are a variety of strategies here. And the first is critical. We need to answer those questions about what do we want to accomplish? And some of it is going to be what we talked about with the fishing metaphor, but also it's going to be, there may be other things we want to accomplish, such as identifying our strategic partner opportunities. We may have existing customers that are in the room as well, that we want part of our group to focus on further penetrating those accounts. So normally in a trade show, we'll put a different set of people in the booth versus those that are out on the floor or in one-on-one meetings. So we'll put the salespeople in the one-on-one meetings and the executives in those one-on-one meetings where we're actually signing deals, where we're closing business. And then we'll put the engagement folks in the booth who are more responsible for prospect identification and getting people to opt in, those that are appropriate. And so when we look at those strategies, then we're going to want to train people to those outcomes, and then obviously have the metrics, those KPIs, that we can give them goals for each of their roles by day or by event or by hour, whatever makes sense in that context. And then, of course, we can measure against that, and we can begin creating accountability and rewarding to that and to those outcomes. And even more than that, we can begin measuring our event success and compare event success from event to event, or year over year with the same event, or period over period with the same event. So the ability to be able to begin optimizing comes from those comparative or relative measures that allow us to continue to sort of develop how we go to events, which is going to be everything from, again, thinking of the fishing metaphor, where do we go? Where do we go fishing? To what bait do we put in the water, which is kind of our people and our process and the actual bait. What's the offer that we give our audience? So hopefully you found this helpful. I again apologize that Sue wasn't able to make it. It's frustrating when the technology isn't our friend, but I think we hopefully passed along some really good tips for you. Just so you know, we convert all of these webinars into blog posts as well, so that we do a lot of writing on these topics. If you go to our website, meetroi.com, and go out to our blogs, you'll see blog posts from all of our webinars. And actually, a webinar generally creates anywhere from 3 to 8 blog posts. So there's lots of nuggets, lots of content. And so it's easy to sort of share the subparts of these topics. The other thing I'd mention, actually, our next event, our next webinar, which will be on a new YouTube platform that may have worked out some of these little kinks, is it's called Setting Appointments with the C-Suite. So we're actually really privileged to have Bob Good from Good Leads with us that day, and we're going to be focused on how do we get appointments with executives, and what's the process? How do we do it well? How do we do it consistently? How do we build teams that can do it? All those kinds of things. His company specializes in setting appointments with the C-Suite, and he's obviously got a lot of knowledge and wisdom to share with us. So we're really excited about that. That event is going to be on Tuesday, August 20th. So I guess that's roughly 4 weeks from today, I believe. And so please join us for that. Certainly let us know if any questions you have or any ways that we can be of service. It's been a real delight to be with you today. I'll ask Sue to make sure that she makes some comments for us so that you all can get some of her wisdom as well. Maybe we'll record an addendum to this so you have some more information. And I'm sure she would have added a lot to the conversation. So again, you all have a great rest of your day. Some of you, this is evening. Enjoy your evening. Some of you, this is morning. Enjoy your morning. But hopefully we talk to you all again real soon. Thanks so much. And again, send us any questions. Bye for now.